I drive with Dusty now, and so now I'm like the Christian rap queen. Okay, so I know all the Christian rappers, like, okay, Lecrae, The Rap, Derek Minor. Okay, so I'm really good at this now. And so Cheyenne called me, and she's like all excited. She's like, Mom, Lecrae and Derek Minor, they're coming to town. So I start rapping for her, okay? Dear Mr. Christian, I know you're on a mission. I mean, so I go through this whole thing, and you can just see her rolling her eyes. And I said, this is like the coolest thing because I'm going to go with you. And she's like, what do you think she said? No, you're not. You are so not going with me. So she doesn't like my rapping and my dancing, and apparently I would embarrass her to death. So I'm not going. It's kind of sad. All right, Saturday we decided to go see a movie. We have not seen a movie forever, and we didn't even know what was out. Looked on the list, and there's a new movie out called I Fell in Love with a Church Girl. Did anyone see it? Did you see it? Okay, yeah. It was really cute and really sad because we went there Saturday, it opened Friday. I think there was 8 people in the theater. It like broke my heart because I'm like, here we finally have some really good. There's another one called Grace something. Okay, because I've been trying to get I was going to go see it yesterday, but so okay, I'm going to make sure and see that then. So anyway, we went there. Stephen Baldwin is in it, and so that made me know it's a Christian movie. But it's a true story about how God radically changed this guy's life. So it's really, really good. So go to support that. But anyway, it reminded me when we saw it what this whole lesson is about today. And we're closing out our series, People Like Us, which I'm sure you guys are thrilled to finally have a new set after 10 weeks. This is the 10th week we've done this. So, but something really hit me this week, and I felt it was very, very important for us to end this all on. And is this, and I want to realize, or I want to make us recognize the disciples, this is what happened to them, and it should happen to us, and this is what it is that when Jesus told people things to do, they were doers of the word, they were not hearers of the word. So I want to start in James, hence the compact mirrors in front of you, and I'll tell you where all this came from this week. James 1:23, it's in your handout. Your handout's going to be weird today. Somehow on Tuesdays, I decide to change the whole lesson after everything's already been printed. I don't know what that is. It was like 8 o'clock last night, and I'm changing stuff. So I don't know what my problem is. But anyway, so I'm going to tell you, but this first verse is on your first page, and then I think we end up going to a different page. So James 1:23. For if anyone is a hearer of the word and not a doer, he is like a man who looks at his natural face in a mirror. For once he looked at himself and has gone away, he has immediately forgotten what kind of a person he was. But one who looks intently at the perfect law, the law of liberty, and abides by it, not having become a forgetful hearer but an effectual doer, this man will be blessed in what he does. So I want you, as you pick out your compact mirror every time, to remember that God's word, when we read the Bible, that's just like a mirror to us. So when we read it, it's one of those things that we should see. So I have an example. Okay, so here's me in the morning. So here I'm going to do my hair. Okay, one of my daughter-in-laws they taught me how to do this. So you tease it, and then you spray it. Okay, we're going to do this a little bit. Tease it, spray it. Tease it. Okay, spray it. Okay, there's me. Okay, now, then I walk around the house, and this is what I look like all around the house. And then I come back at the end of the day, or in the morning before I come here, and I go back into the mirror, and I look at it, and I'm like, oh, wow, that looks really weird. And then I make it, because now I have a responsibility that when I see something in the mirror that isn't right, that I have to do something about it, or I'm going to look okay, this is me. We may be here all day until I get this right. Okay, but the point is that that's what the Bible is like for us. God's saying, I'm giving you my word, and what I expect you to do is look at it. It's like a mirror. And we have a responsibility once he shows us what's in his word to go and do it, and if we don't, then that's a problem. Because he wants us to be doers of what he says, not just hearers. And I think because we talk so much in here, and it's kind of our passion, women's Bible study, because I want us to know the word so well. So I'm always like, study the word, learn the word, read the word, do everything. But I think the part that we're missing is the part that says, what do I do with it after I read it? And if I'm just reading it, looking at it and going, yeah, that's really nice, and then walking away and it never affecting our life and changing us, then we've got some serious problems going on. Now, I realized this week, God always teaches me really lessons that he wants me, and I always blame it on you because then it's your fault that all this happens to me because that's a lesson I have to learn. But we have this well that's being drilled up in Flagstaff, and it was supposed to be about a 4-week job, and now it's months and months and months. So the guy calls last Friday, and he's telling Rob like what the new problem is, okay? And when he does that, it just frustrates me. So Rob, my husband's like the nicest guy in the world. And so he's just like, yeah, okay, no problem. You're good to go. He gets off the phone and he goes, okay, let me tell you what's going on. And I said, Rob, you could tell me anything, and this is what I'm going to hear. Blah, 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 blah. Okay, because that's just, the guy just, excuse after excuse, and frankly, I am sick of it. And when I said that, I realized how cynical and it's just kind of mean and just everything that God, like I read the Bible and it says, what is love? It's being kind to people and being patient with people and all that. But no, I wasn't like that. So my choice in that way is to look at that mirror or look at the Bible and say, God, what am I doing wrong? There's an attitude or an action or something, and the Bible is my mirror, and now I can either walk away and not let it change me, or I can sit down and say, God, change me. I don't want to be cynical like that, like I have been. This isn't in your handout, but it's a verse Rob and I talked about after that. James 3:9-10. He says, he's talking about our mouth and our tongue. With it we bless our Lord and Father, and with it we curse men. We have been made who have been made in the likeness of God. From the same mouth come both blessing and cursing. My brethren, these things ought not to be this way. And it's so true. It's like we go to church, we come to Bible study, we come here, we're like, yay, Jesus, we praise Jesus, we raise our hand, and then we go home and our mouths just blah, 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 blah. And it's a bad thing. And so I want us to remember that as a disciple, as a follower of Christ, our job isn't just to read and learn, but what are we going to do with it after we learn what we're supposed to learn? Because here's what I realized this week, is that when we get to heaven, God is not going to give us a quiz. He's not going to say, hey, you did this like study in Luke way back then, so here's your question. What is the Greek and Hebrew meaning of the word disciple? You'll be like, I don't know, Lisa never told us that. Do you know the names of all the 12 original disciples? And I would like to know how they died. See, God's not going to ask us all of our knowledge questions, but what he is going to do is say, what did you do with what you learned? I was thinking about this, that think about the men in the time of Jesus. Who were the men that knew the most Bible? The Pharisees. They knew it, they memorized it, recited it, they knew it more than anybody. And yet, who killed Jesus? The Pharisees. So it's kind of like you can know a whole lot and not have it affect your life in any way. And I am saying that for me just as much. So I think that God is really going to ask us more things like, what did you do? Because a disciple is a learner, to be sure, because we need to learn. But I don't see the disciples just soaking in what Jesus said and then never going out and doing something about it. They acted on what he said. And so this is the statement that pretty much haunted me all week long. Spiritual maturity is not what we know, but what we do. Spiritual maturity is not what we know, but what we do. And I didn't like that because I have a problem sometimes because I like to study. That's just who I am. It's just what I like to do. It's easier for me to study than it is to actually put it in practice, and I'll tell you how I learned that. Verse 26 says, if anyone thinks himself to be religious and yet does not bridle his tongue, but deceives his own heart, this man's religion is worthless. Now, when we read that, our first bent is to be like, yay, James, that's an awesome verse. I'm going to write that out and pin that on my refrigerator, okay? But look what it says. Bridling your tongue, that's what being religious means. That means following Christ is all about, is what we say, doing something with what we just learned. And so I learned this week, once again. It was the worst week, by the way. Rob and I have been married 34 years now. And after 34 years, you just kind of know how to get along. Like, I know what not to say to him, and he knows what not to say to me. Last Monday, we were driving back from Flagstaff, and we got in the biggest fight. It was the stupidest thing. It was like little 2-year-olds. And I would say something mean to him. It would be like, you're mean. You're meaner. You're the meanest. You're the meaner meanest. Okay, whatever. It was just the stupidest thing you've ever seen. But it was ugly and it was mean, and I said mean things to him, and he said mean things to me. And it wasn't because, like I said, after 34 years, you're just kind of like, whatever. It's just nothing is that big of a deal. But it kind of was. So we get home, and I'm still really annoyed with him. He's annoyed with me. We get home. Our kids work at home. So, of course, they walk out, and they're like, hey, Mom and Dad. We're like, hi. They're like, what's wrong? Nothing. Okay, so we go our separate ways. Here's me. I go grab my computer, and I walk out the door. And he says, where are you going? And I said, I am going to study for my Bible study. Okay. Really? Okay, I'm angry. I screamed and yelled at my husband, and I'm going to go study my Bible because it's way easier to study this stuff than to live it, okay? And I'm right there with you if that's your problem. So he said, no, we need to talk about this. So we went into the office, and we sat down, and we tried to work through it, and we were pleasant, but no one said they were sorry because I'm pretty sure that I'm right. I think that's a woman thing. But so I knew I was still mad at him that night and you'll laugh at this because you probably get this. So when we sleep, I have to sleep on my back. So I take my leg and I put my leg over top of his leg, and that's how we sleep. Well, that night I put my toe on his foot. I'm like, that's the extent of how close we're getting tonight. So I knew I was still really annoyed with him. But the great thing about my husband is he has this spiritual maturity thing really down. For him, it's not just like, oh, I'm going to read the Bible and read the words on a page, and then we're going to be good to go. He lives it. So he woke up that morning, and first thing he reads is Psalms 139. I think I put it on your thing. Search me, O God, and know my heart. Try me and know my anxious thoughts, and see if there is any hurtful way in me, and lead me in the way of everlasting life. Okay, now I practically hate that verse, okay? I just that would be the last verse I would go to after that, because that's what I'm saying. Spiritual maturity is not what you say, it's what you do, and he's got this thing figured out. So for him, it's just not words, and God just convicts him, and so he sits down with me. He's like, Lisa, I'm so sorry. Well, I'm sorry too then. Okay. I mean, it's just ridiculous, but it just made me realize that it's hard, especially as a woman, I think, because, like I said, we think that we're right all the time. But I think we forget sometimes that that's why we read our Bible. It's so that we know how to act and how to treat other people. And he's just like, I'm so sorry. So for him, it was this heartfelt, God convicted me. And that's what spiritual maturity is, okay, which apparently I don't have much of. And I realized that this week. But I think that real life, spiritual maturity is not what I know, but what I do. And so I thought about that this week as we were doing this lesson. I thought I really want us to realize that we could come here and we can do this every day until the day we die. But if it is not impacting our life, and that was my prayer, because I had to really look in my little mirror after Rob and I got done with this, and I had to be like, man, something's really wrong with me. Okay, it's not Rob, it's me. I got a bad attitude, I'm cynical, I'm grumpy, I'm witchy, whatever the issue is. And I had to look and say, I didn't just walk away and forget it. It bothered me all week. I'm like, God, what's wrong with me? Please change me, because that's what I need in this whole. Granted, he was grumpy and I was grumpy and whatever, but I can't look at him, just like he always says, Lisa, I don't look at your sin, I look at my own sin, which is really a good thing. So today we're going to, that was just my little side note. Okay, now we'll start the lesson. So today we're going to talk about, I told you last week we would talk about the difficult sayings of Jesus, because when he says things, you and I are going to have to either obey him and listen to him, or we have one of two choices. We're going to walk away, or we're going to do what he asks us to do. Those are really our two options here. So the thing is that as a follower of Jesus, we're going to say, are these words just sweet and nice things that Jesus says, or is it something that's going to affect my life? So this is where you're going to have to go to, I don't even know what page it is, 3, 4, it's John 6:51 through 56. Page 3. Okay, I flipped this around last night because I was running out of time, and I knew I needed to talk to you guys about this because I told you I would last week. So this is one of the weird scenes in the Bible where Jesus says something so outrageous that you're just like, what does that mean? So we'll read this, we'll deal with this, and then we'll go from there. John 6:51-56. I am the living bread that came down out of heaven. If anyone eats of this bread, he will live forever. The bread also which I will give for the life of the world is my flesh. Then the Jews began to argue with one another, saying, how can this man give us his flesh to eat? So Jesus said to him, truly, truly, I say to you, unless you eat the flesh of the Son of Man and drink his blood, you have no life in yourself. He who eats my flesh and drinks my blood has eternal life, and I will raise him up on the last day. For my flesh is true food, and my blood is true drink. He who eats my flesh and drinks my blood abides in me, and I in him. Okay. Picture yourself sitting there listening to Jesus say that. And honestly, I would be a little confused too, and I'd be like, that's disgusting. Like, what does he mean? Like, they think he's coming to become king and take over, and he's saying almost cannibal, vampire, weird stuff. And you're like, I don't even get what he's talking about. But I think what we have to see is that when we come to difficult parts of the scriptures, we have a choice to either say, that's stupid, that doesn't make sense, I'm out of here, which a lot of the disciples did. Or we can say, what does that mean? Let's get down and study and talk about what exactly does Jesus mean when he says that, because it's got to be important or he didn't say it. So, just for you, so that you know what it means, Jim Drake is a pastor, and he did a really good little synopsis on this. So this is what he says it means, which made sense to me. It's on your handout. He's talking about what it means to truly believe in him. Believing in Jesus is more than just wanting him to do good things for you. It's more than just believing a set of facts about him. No, believing Jesus is feasting on him. Believing Jesus is dwelling in him. Just as you take in food and drink to keep you alive, if you're a believer, you have to continually feed on Jesus to keep you alive. As you hunger and thirst for food, your spirit will hunger and thirst for Jesus. Jesus is giving a very graphic picture of what it means to have a relationship with him. A relationship with Jesus is intimate, it is life-sustaining, it is continual, it is living, and it is life-giving. And if you have that relationship with Jesus, it is forever. You will live forever, feeding on the bread of life forever. So I thought that was a great way to put that so that people understand what that exactly meant. But for many of the people that followed him, he had his 12, and then there was lots of other disciples that weren't in his inner circle that followed him during this time. And when they heard Jesus say that, look what John 6:60 says. Therefore, many of his disciples, when they heard this, said, this is a difficult statement. Who can listen to it? So they're right off the bat totally confused, just like I probably would have been. But Jesus is trying to make this point that I'm not here just for miracles. I'm not here to just feed you bread and give you sustenance that way. I want you to know that it's more of an eternal thing that I'm here for you to feast on forever, for eternity. And he's trying to make that point. But the crowds didn't understand what he meant, so they start to disperse. And they're just suddenly leaving, and you can just kind of see Peter and James and John looking at Jesus like, whoa, Jesus, this has been kind of fun. Like, people love you. They love us because they love you, and we're kind of you're the rock star, we're the groupies or whatever. People come to us because they love you, and now they're all leaving. Jesus, do something. Like, do a miracle, raise someone from the dead, do something, because what you're saying when you say the hard stuff, people don't want to hear that. And that was Jesus' point. Like, you're right. People don't want the hard stuff. They want the easy stuff. But the tide is kind of turning, and he's saying, here's the deal. If you're going to be my disciple, you're going to have to deal with the hard stuff. That's what's going to happen. Look at verse 61. But Jesus said, conscious that his disciples grumbled at this, said to them, does this cause you to stumble? Kind of, yeah. He knew exactly what they were thinking. But look at what John 6:67 says. He says, so Jesus said to the 12, you do not want to go away also, do you? I mean, he just knows exactly what they're thinking. Like, okay, when we're hit with really difficult things that Jesus says for us to do, what are we going to do? Do you want to leave? Do you want to walk away because it's not how you thought it was supposed to be? And you kind of look at Peter and James going, okay, the crowd's thinning out. They're being laughed at. The leader of the way seems a little crazy. And now Peter and James and John are looking around like, I don't know what to think of all this anymore. And I think the question that Jesus asks them is the same one that he's going to ask you and me when we come upon those times when your family thinks you're crazy, when you get fired from your job because you actually stood up for your faith, when you're sick and tired of being married to your spouse, and you know what the Bible says you're supposed to do, but you're just done. You're done. And those are the days that you and I are going to face the same thing that the disciples faced, like, what are you going to do? Are you going to leave too because you don't like what I have to say? And as a disciple, we're going to have to determine that in our head. And I always say we need to determine it now before it actually happens. So I think it was a defining moment for these 12 and a lot of those that walked away and the ones that stayed, defining moment for them. Because we have to come to ask ourselves, will I follow Jesus even during the difficult times, even when he says to do something that I don't really like? John 6:66 says, as a result of this, many of his disciples withdrew and were not walking with him anymore. See, and this is a great verse to tell people because people go, oh, once saved, always saved. Okay, whatever. I always say, if you're saved, you're going to persevere to the end. You're going to work your way through the really difficult times. You're not going to just walk away. You just won't. You can't. Because God said, Jesus says, I'm the author and the finisher of your faith. So he authors it. He's going to finish it. You're not going to walk away. But there are these pretend disciples that show up because they want the miracles, they want the food, they want the free stuff. Rob was doing a study this morning, and what did they say? Do you want to be a consumer or a follower? And those are really our choices, because there's a lot of people that are just consumers, and a lot of the disciples were. They wanted him to feed them, they wanted him to heal them, but when it came time to doing something difficult, they're like, yeah, no thanks. Now, Peter's response is amazing, and I feel like we've talked about this a couple months ago, but I can't remember because that's just me, but if we did, it's worth hearing it again. But when Jesus asked him, what do you guys want to do? Peter says this in verse 68. Simon Peter answered him, Lord, to whom shall we go? You have the words of eternal life. And I really started thinking about that, and the question is, where would I go? Like, where would you go if you walked away from Jesus? I don't know. The thought frightens me because every one of us, we're going to have to come to that point sometime when bad things happen. And you're going to wonder, why is God silent? When little Katie Wagner died, it made me really mad at God. Really, God? Why would you do that to her and her family? I don't even understand that. And all of our lives, we're going to be hit with these really times where you just don't understand what God is doing. And you and I are going to have the choice. Are we going to walk away or are we going to stay? And Peter says, where would I go? And here's your options. Alcoholism, drug addiction, false religion, something that isn't true, Buddhism, Mohammedanism, whatever, you name it. Higher learning in school, I just want to go get my education. Okay, that's great. But what does that have to do with eternity? Because we're going one place, heaven or hell. Those are our options here. And I just can't imagine that there's any place that has the words of eternal life except Jesus. And it frightens me to think that that I would ever turn away, because there's nowhere else to go. And Peter gets that. And I just always want to remind you, Andy Stanley did the greatest job when he did this. He has a series called Follow, and his very last one is called Unfollow. And that's what's stuck in my mind, is this whole idea of where would I go? And if you remember nothing from today, when the tough times come in your life, think about that. Where would I go? Where would I go? Life's short. We're going one place or the other. And Jesus is the answer to that. So anyway, I thought that was important. All right, the second thing, and this will be the last one thing that we talk about, a hard saying of Jesus. And this one I hate. Oh my gosh, it's John 13:35. I don't even know what page we're on now. It's probably back towards the beginning. By this, all men will know that you are my disciples if you have love for one another. Okay, now think about this. when the disciples were walking on the earth, Jesus has now been resurrected, ascended into heaven. They couldn't just go learn this stuff from Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John because they were Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. Okay, they hadn't even written it yet. So what people would hear and see would be the lives of these people that would follow Jesus. And the way that they knew that they were followers is because they showed love. Because the evidence of faith in their life was them loving people to Jesus. I remember one time listening to Joyce Meyer, and she said, out of all of her series, the love series was the least listened to, least sold, least everything. And I laughed when she said it because I looked through the catalog and I saw that love thing. I said, not for me. I don't want to do that, because it dawned on me this week, what is my problem with that? Love is something that has to output something. I want to input something. I want something to be inputted to me, to make me happy, to make my life better. But love says I have to do something for somebody else. And I don't know that I want to do that often. And yet, Jesus says that is the one thing that will separate us from anyone else, our love for one another. I was thinking when I was looking at her catalog, for me, it's like, and probably for you, I would rather learn how to conquer fear, or how to just not fight with my husband, or how to lose weight, or those kind of things are what we want, because that helps me. But when you ask me to love someone, that takes a lot of effort, and that's hard work, and I would rather look in the mirror and say, that's okay, I don't really want to do that today. And the problem is that Jesus says that's the one tangible way that people are going to know you're my followers. And yet somehow these churches and people have gotten mixed signals, and now it's crazy out there. I'm going to give you some examples. My friend works for Young Life. They have a what's it called? Special needs section to Young Life. And she said she got a phone call one day, and this woman on the phone was asking all about the special needs, and she's made this comment. The church that I go to told me not to come back until my son was healed. Because he's not healed means I don't have enough faith. I was like, someone said that? It was so heartbreaking. I'm like, who says things like that? But do you see what? Somehow someone got this weird thing going on in their head, and where is the love? I just don't get it. I thought a girl Facebooked me the other day. I can't remember if I told you this. She writes in there, message, I need to know if you use the King James Version of the Bible. If you don't, I will unfriend you, and I need a prompt answer. Here's my prompt answer. Good thing you don't see me, okay? It was really frustrating, and I was like, really? Because the overriding feeling after I said, don't worry, I'll unfriend you before you unfriend me, okay? But the overriding thought was, I'm going to assume that the King James Version and the NIV and the NASB and the Message all say the same thing. Jesus says, love one another. I don't know how someone misses that. Then I went to... I told you we've been doing the question and answers in the morning. So for those of you that don't know what that is, gotquestions.org has a really great site. There's 367,000 questions. So every morning I would post one on Facebook, because I'm thinking, okay, there's a big audience out there. People can learn. They can grow in their faith. They can learn. We're dealing with things like, what were some of the questions this week? Miracles. Why does God allow tsunamis and hurricanes, and what does the Bible say about whatever? I can't even think of it right now. But anyway, they're really, really good questions. So I post them on Facebook. And this girl and this guy start arguing with me. Like, what are you saying, Lisa? That there's no such thing as miracles? And I'm like, I didn't say that there's no such thing as miracles. And I was trying to explain my point. And the guy, I can hear him yelling at me the way he talks. And he's arguing with me. I've seen dead people come back to life. Pick a side, Lisa, pick a side. And I'm like, okay, here's the side. I'm going to block you too, okay? But the point is where are people so unloving, about Jesus and the gospel and who's right and who's wrong? And I used to be that way. Thank the Lord I'm not anymore, because I just think God's saying, I just want you to love one another. That's what's the key to this whole thing. I had a lady email me one time. I think it was a lady, maybe it wasn't. And she basically told me I was going to hell because I'm teaching men. And I said, okay, somehow you missed the bright pink button, hot pink not less, that says women's Bible study. This is not a men's Bible study. If men are here, well, they're not, David. David has to be here, though. But it's not a men's Bible study. It's just not. But if someone joins, it's not my fault, whatever. But it's kind of like, I don't know what the problem is, but we need to get back to saying, look, as a disciple, we need to get rid of the whole divisions in the churches and say, you know what, let's just love Jesus. That would be a really, really good idea. Look at 1 Corinthians 8:1. Back in the days of Paul in Corinth, they had a problem with people that would sacrifice like a lamb or a goat or whatever. They would sacrifice to idols, and then they would sell that meat on the open market. And Christians would come along, and they were concerned, do I eat the meat? Does God allow me to? Should I not? What's the plan here? And so those were the issues that they had back then. But for us, it could be questions on baptism or speaking in tongues or what translation of the Bible to use, whatever. So that's kind of the background to this. Look at verse 1. Now about food offered to idols. Of course we know that all of us possess knowledge concerning these matters, yet mere knowledge causes people to be puffed up, to bear themselves loftily and be proud. But love, affection, and goodwill and benevolence edifies and builds up and encourages one to grow to his full stature. Because that's what Jesus says. The greatest of all the commandments. Someone asked him, what's the greatest commandment? Love God with all your heart, soul, and mind, and then love others. That's just it. The whole law comes down to those two things. And the more we know God and look in the mirror at ourselves, the more we're going to be able to love somebody else. But honestly, I just think it's really hard. It just is. And I'm right there with you. And every day, and now that all last week happened, and now with the mirror thing, I realize when I read something, I don't want to read it any longer just to read it. I want to say, God, change my life. Because if you're not changing my life and I'm just doing this for knowledge's sake, I don't want it to be like that, because I don't think that's what God calls us to do as his followers. I read a story of a woman who got a divorce. She lost her whole family. She was in complete desperate need. She went into depression. And she went to church. And she said all the people did at church was shake their hand at her and wave their finger, probably somewhere down in the south, I would say. And so she left the church and she started going to the bar. And finally the preacher came to her one day and said, why are you doing that? And she said, because the people at the bar smile at me. Okay? So it's a really good lesson to us, a life lesson. Say, do I smile at people? When did we become this judgmental, loveless group of people? I don't know, because we're all reading the same Bible. But I think it comes to do with like the churches that we go to, or the legalistic backgrounds that we've gone through. And the church, people say, you have to do this and you have to do that. And I was just reading an article of a church that there was some gay pride thing, and the church was all up in arms and don't let those people in. And yet the church across the street said, everyone welcome. Because you know what? People that are gay, they need Jesus just as much. But how are they going to find him if someone isn't welcoming and say, come in, join us, and let us share with you Jesus that can change your life, okay? But somewhere along the line, we've been told to separate and don't have anything to do and get in your little clique and don't. I don't want us to be that way. I want us to be women that say, let's get out there and love one another. Okay, now for me, I'm sick and tired of hearing the word love. If I go to another wedding that I have to hear 1 Corinthians 13, I'm pretty much going to throw up because they start talking, love is patient and love is kind, and this is what I'm thinking. God, I hope they have really good food. I mean, I wonder what they're having for dinner. Like, they just lose me when I hear 1 Corinthians 13, okay, because I'm kind of just tired of the whole thing. But it made me think, okay, if Jesus is telling us that we're supposed to love people, what exactly does that mean? Does that mean it's a feeling? Do I have to feel love in order to actually do it? And I think the perfect example is Romans 5:8, that God demonstrates his own love towards us, and that while we were yet sinners, he died for us. It wasn't like he felt like he loved us. It wasn't a feeling. It was like he went to the cross for us out of love, and that really wasn't a feeling. So I think that the first thing we need to realize is love is a choice. It's something that we have to make a choice. Now, I found this and I thought it was kind of funny. cards that you will never see at Hallmark. Okay, Hallmark is the love and you're the most awesome person. So I wrote them out for you because they were really funny. Looking back over the years that we've been together, I can't help but wonder, what was I thinking? I've always wanted to have someone to hold, someone to love. But after having met you, I've changed my mind. As the days go by, I think of how lucky I am that you're not here to ruin it for me. As you grow older, Mom, I think of all the gifts you've given me, like the need for therapy. When we were together, you always said you'd die for me. Well, now that we've broken up, I think it's time you kept your promise. We have been friends for a very long time. What do you say we call it quits? I'm so miserable without you. It's almost like you're here. You're such a good friend that if we were on a sinking ship and there were only one life jacket, I would miss you heaps and think of you often, okay? So those are just how the world thinks. It's kind of negative and it's down. And that's just how the world thinks. And so we want to come in and say, okay, I want to start looking in the mirror and saying, what is this whole deal with love? Because I apparently, after this last week, don't get it, and so I need to learn this. So I wrote the whole 1 Corinthians 13 out for you, 4 through 7. I'm going to pick out 2 or 3 of them, and we're just going to talk about them for a second. Love is patient, okay? Right off the bat, that one just, my life is ruined at that one, okay? But patience with what? The husband who annoys you, the child that's rebellious, the boss that hates you or your husband, the 3-month-old that keeps you up at night, the next-door neighbor who yells at you because you're on his lawn. Okay, patience says, whatever, yell at me, it doesn't really matter. Because Jesus was very, very patient with us, and he expects us to do the same for other people. Love is kind. This one's hard for me. It's easy to be kind to Rob when he is kind to me. That's just the way I look at life. But the Bible is saying, no, I want you to be kind to people when they're not that kind to you. Like the person who talked behind your back, the teacher who hates your child, the homeless person on the street, the lady down the street you know is having an affair. You don't really want to be kind to her. The person you don't like very well and they just lost their job and you're kind of happy about it, but you know you need to be kind. It's those situations. It's not the people that are easy. It's the ones that are really difficult. And Jesus is saying, those are the ones that I want you to be kind to and to be patient with. Does not act unbecomingly. The girl at the checkout station at Walmart. Okay, this is my biggest problem at Walmart. I buy 50 cans of dog food. Okay, common sense says, oh, there's 50 of them. Ding. Times 50, you're good to go. Nope. 1, put it in the thing. 2, I'm like, I want to wring their neck, okay? And it gives me I want to just act unbecomingly is what I want to do. So that, but it could be anything. Someone spills a drink on you, your Starbucks order's wrong, and then I yelled at someone on the phone this week because they were supposed to send us a title to a car, and they lied to me, and I was angry, and I found myself acting very unbecomingly, and I was like, what is wrong with me? I just need a do-over for next week. Hopefully I'll be nicer this week, so next week I won't have all these. The stories are bad this week because they're all bad about me. But, okay, and then it doesn't seek its own. Where do you want to go to dinner? But what if your husband wants to go someplace else or your friend wants to go someplace else? What about the TV show? What do you want to watch? Rob's been on this really strict diet. He said 500 calories a day. He just got off of it Saturday. He said, let's go out to dinner. So he picks the restaurant that he wants to go to. And in my mind, there's a big old thing of bread. Okay, it's lots of different kinds of bread. I'm so excited for the bread. And so we're talking about what we're going to have because he's like, okay, I can only let's split a steak and we'll do this. And then right off the end of that, he says, and we'll just ask for no bread. Okay. Now, I have a choice. Okay. Am I going to care more for him or am I going to care more for me? And because he watches this now, from now on, he's going to make sure I have bread there. But for that night, it was like absolutely no bread. It's not even an option, And I don't always do that, but I'm hoping to get there. But that's what it means. It means it's not about us. That's what love is. It's seeking the other person more than me. Rob has this handout that he hands out at Bible study. It's called Dying to Self. And because this is what I think we're learning. Jesus is all about loving people regardless of what they do to us. And that's really hard, especially if you have the wicked mother-in-law or you have the wicked neighbor or the evil child or stepchild. And God, I don't care who they are. You are called to love them regardless. And that's where I think this whole rubber meets the road comes when it comes to loving people. But I think that we need to take this even a step further and go, okay, what about that person who talked behind my back? They said some really ugly things. What do I do with them? Call them up. Say, hey, you want to go to lunch? Let's be friends. Did I say something to offend you? Like, we as Christians, loving someone says, I'm going to make that effort. What about the person who didn't listen to your counsel? Or maybe they didn't invite you to lunch one time. They invited your whole group, but you were left out. I have an idea. Call them and ask them to go to lunch with you by themselves. Like, we can make that step, but somehow it becomes all about us. I'm saying this for myself too. It becomes about me. Well, they hurt my feelings. They shouldn't do that to me. And you see what goes on there? Me, 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 me. And Jesus is like, I want you to die to yourself. Loving me means loving others and dying to yourself and caring more for them than anybody else. Love does not take into account a wrong suffered. Really? That's what Jesus says love is. It means I'm not going to, you hurt me, I'm going to be just let it roll off my back. It's going to be okay. Because I think that our problem is that we want people to do what makes us happy. And Jesus comes along and said, I died on the cross for you. I did all of this for you, and you didn't respond to me very well. And he's saying, as my disciple, I expect you to do the same thing. And that's what he's calling us to do. Not just be hearers of the word and go, oh, love is patient and kind and never jealous or envious or boastful or proud. Okay, that's cool. Shut the Bible up and go about our day. No. He's saying, we're going to study this, and I'm going to tell you what love really means, and now I expect you to go do it. Because that's the only way that people are going to know that you are my disciple. Because the world says you should be hateful, and you should be bitter, and you should be angry at the person, and you should talk about them behind their back, and you should do all those things and write them one of those Hallmark cards that won't ever be. But he says, no. He said, because how you respond to those kind of people is going to say a lot about your spiritual maturity and my spiritual maturity. We're watching a show one night. It's called Standoff. It's about these two crisis negotiators. And this kid comes in, and he comes into a hospital, and his sister's on a stretcher. He pulls out a gun, and he tells the surgeon, I need you to get this particular surgeon that can help my sister, or I'm going to start shooting the place up. And so they're trying to negotiate with this kid, and the problem is that his sister was dying. And his mom and dad had died, and he was probably 15. He has nobody in his life, okay? And I'm not saying that you should go and shoot up a hospital. That's not what I'm saying, but I'm saying that for many of us, there's a backstory that we don't know. Why is that person treating me that way? What is the problem? And we take it so personally instead of saying, all right, God, let me walk a mile in their shoes. Let me see what it is that makes them so bitter and angry and hateful and mean to me. What is that problem? But regardless of what that problem is, Jesus, you tell me that I'm supposed to love them. And that means me giving because you gave. So that means I need to be the first one to make something better. And that is really, really hard. Because if we take that into the real world with the kid who shoots the gun, there's crazy and sinful people, and they do stupid things, and they kill people, and they become prostitutes and drug addicts and alcoholics, and many people are mentally ill, and they can't get the help that they need. And yet what are we going to do about that? Because our job as followers of Christ is to come alongside of them with compassion and compare. No, compassion and compare. That didn't make sense. Compassion and care. And it's our job to point them to Jesus, not to condemn them. Because I think the thing is, we look in our little mirror and we say, God, I just don't deserve this. I don't deserve to be treated this way. And Jesus is like, yeah, well, I didn't deserve to be hung on a cross, but I was. And because I did that for you, now it's your job to go do that for other people. And I'm going to tell you that it's really, really hard, and it means I have to give up my rights. And I think that's the one thing that I learned this week, is that I have to look in the mirror and say, God, why do I think that this life is about me? And because I do, I'm looking in the mirror and I want to stop that. I want it to be about everybody else. And how that plays out, I don't know. Rob and I were even talking about it before we got here this morning. I said, Rob, one of my kids needed me to watch their grandchild today, but I had plans and I was doing some stuff. And I said, loving means what? Do I cancel my plans? And I don't know what that even looks like. And so I think for each one of us, we need to sit back and say, what does that look like? Because see, we can get really self-righteous and say, I would never act like that to somebody else. And you may not. But other people do. And when they do, what is our responsibility as we close out this series? Am I a hearer of the word or am I a doer? And that's why I wanted to give the compact mirrors. Every time you pull it out of your purse, I want you to think, ooh, am I a hearer or am I a doer? And think about what you read that morning in your Bible. And say, did I learn something to go out into the world, to love people and to share Jesus with others? Or is my life all about me? Okay? Because if it is, then we need to learn to be doers and not hearers of the word. Do I love people or do I love me? Do I serve people or do I serve me? Do I know what's in the Bible or do I do what's in the Bible? Big difference there. All right. Last statement, the one we've said all day long, memorize this. Spiritual maturity is based on what we do, not what we know. Because we can have all this knowledge, but it's got to move forward into being disciples who love others, because when we do, they can come to Jesus.